Okay. My first question for you gentlemen is, how have the principles that you teach most deeply shaped your own spiritual life? How have you applied the principles in your own lives?
You have to select somebody who should address it.
Adam, you go first.
As I kind of inferred before, the principles of NCD run through our entire household. We homeschooled our children, and part of the curriculum was three-colour character tests, because we said, well, what curriculum will we have for homeschooling? And we said, well, we want character as the highest point, and then skills and learning can follow on from that. So my daughter said, why do I have to do maths? Because you hate maths and you need to grow in patience. And so I think that's a very, very big part for me. But certainly the various tests, I mean, I remember the love test going very deep with me in early stages, dealing with certain areas, and I just live in it all the time, and I can't produce a tool unless it's making a difference in my own life. I just can't do that. Like, I can't preach a sermon unless I'm living that thing. I simply can't do that. So, yeah, so profoundly and all the time.
Okay. Christian.
Yeah, I must be honest, when I gradually moved into this kind of ministry, which is by definition both international and interdenominationally, which means when I go to a certain denominational group in a country, I made it a principle because of my job. When I'm 3 days among Anglicans, I become an Anglican for these 3 days. When it's a Pentecostal movement, I become a Pentecostal. You know, I am under the authority of the leadership there. And this is not because I'm such a diplomat and want to be polite and friendly, but it flows, it's the most natural thing for me. I feel myself as a part of the body of Christ in this room. If it's interdenominational, it's interdenominational, but in most cases it is denominational. And I discovered this tendency that I really, in my emotions deeply, I sense, now I'm Orthodox, now I am Adventist, whatever it is. So I didn't expect this to happen. I thought in the beginning, you know, I have Lutheran background, the more evangelical variety of Lutheranism originally, and this is my identity. And now I learn to graciously look a little bit beyond the borders. And there can be even some Christians like Salvation Army or Anglicans or so, and they are not all wrong. This is usually called ecumenicism, you know. And nothing like this happens. It's, if I define my identity, I am not, when I say want to be fully three-colored, it's not that I'm balanced in all of the three colors. I'm as imbalanced as everybody else. But my longing is, particularly the colors or the color shades, the segments, where I'm not strong yet, and to learn that from others. And since I can encounter other people who are strong where I'm weak, what a privileged situation. I learn, I listen to them, not to preach my thing to them, but to learn from them because I want to grow. So that was enormous, and I find that healthy. Maybe final sentence to this. Paul himself spoke about the oikumene, the whole, it was at that time the habitated world around the Mediterranean area, not because China didn't exist, but he didn't know that it existed, you know what I mean. But now we have literally the chance. I probably have every day some contact to all of the 5 continents and different denominations, and this has become me. When I'm in a completely Lutheran setting, I should feel much more comfortable, some people would say. No, I think, yeah, it's nice, but something is missing. There should be more. You know, this is the effect, and I don't say it should be in other people the same. The same thing should happen, but it simply happened in my life like this, and I thank God for that. I think I appreciate that very much.
One of the things I've always admired about Christian is this idea that I can learn everywhere. Every time you speak, you say you learn something. And I used to think when I first heard that, oh sure. Because you have all the ideas, we're learning from you, but I've come over the years to not only see it in you, but learn it myself when I'm with other people, this idea that I can learn from one another. You've kind of talked already about Lutheranism and being German and what that's kind of shaped you, but we haven't heard much about being a Salvation Army person from Australia. Adam, how's that had to be reframed? And be kind.
Well, I think, again, NCD was incredibly helpful for me to better understand my church upbringing, because we would be in a Salvation Army worship service when I was a teenager and say, call out your prayers to Jesus and the way you see Jesus. And thank you for your love, Jesus, and thank you for your mercy and your kindness. And I'd call out, oh, Jesus, you're a genius. And there'd be people sort of laughing, and I thought, well, no, that's actually Jesus' power of logic and reason is the most profound thing for me of all of his traits. The other things are nice, but for me, that's what it is. And the Salvation Army is not the most strongly developed rational style movement in the world. And so growing up, I was involved in the things, but my own spiritual style wasn't really catered for. And so even taking the spiritual style test was very profound for me, because it validated my own spiritual life, and it probably then helped me also to have a bit less hostile feeling towards the movement I grew up in, because I appreciated so many things about it, but I didn't feel like it appreciated me. But suddenly over time there was able to be that merging together, which is wonderful. I mean, I'm still involved with the Salvation Army and in various different ways, and I'm just encouraged to see the increasing capacity to speak the spiritual language of each other, as you've talked about in some of the spiritual style things within the army as well. So, yeah, it's a good thing.
And being Australian?
And being Australian, yeah. Well, it sort of worked well. You got rude Germans and rude Australians, and it seemed to be no problem at all. It seemed to work relatively early on. What was your question about Australia?
How has being Australian shaped you or misshaped you, maybe?
Yeah. Oh, well, it's interesting. One of the things we did many years ago, I don't know when it was, but we looked at minimum factors of whole countries, zoomed out on the entire global database. And Russia had empowering leadership as the minimum factor, which was a profound surprise to everyone in the universe. But then, the likes of Australia was strong in loving relationships because it's a country formed of convicts, and whoever could make it the other side of the world and set up a fruit shop from Greece or wherever. So incredible number of countries. So and then going off and fighting wars, overseas, never on our own land, but always going somewhere else. And so there was this mateship that was developed. So it was interesting to see in the Australian culture that picture was there. But then also for an Australian, seeing low passionate spirituality and understanding that we live in what's called the lucky country. So, well, what do you need God for if you live in the lucky country? And that's a real issue, because in the Australian world, there's not a high envisioning of what could be. In fact, we have the tall poppy syndrome. If someone does start rising up, you'll cut them off, which is terrible. So it's mateship, like we'll be mates as long as you don't stand out or do anything too well. And so that's an interesting challenge, even in the work I do and with churches, trying to push and say, no, let's aim higher. Let's aim for greater passion, greater possibilities. Let's fix our eyes to a higher level.
How have you seen the church change over the last 30 years? And how have you seen it change as a result of NCD? What impact, and I know this calls it on a certain amount of humility, but what impact do you think NCD has had on it? It's obviously changed the conversation. You mentioned this a little bit, Christian. Let's start with you, Christian. What are some of the things, I won't say that you're proud of, but that you've noticed that have become different because the conversation's changed?
Of course, different churches experience different effects, which should be the case because they have different minimum factors, different environments, and different visions, and so on. You know, we don't cast one vision and then everybody, because Christian has invented the vision, and then the whole world has to follow that. I find it, to use a mild word, strange, this understanding, and not empowering. What I really see that they become more able to fulfill what they are, what their identity is. I said it before, you know, Anglicans become better Anglicans and Pentecostals better Pentecostals. Orthodox churches, you know, we had it in Canada, one of the best churches with very high scores in inspiring worship service, and the partner at that time, it was not you, but it was a merger with Willow Creek, and they had the Willow Creek style of worship service. This is the right thing. They confused it with NCD, you know what I mean? It was one and the same thing. High inspirational means Willow Creek kind of church. And they said, it's amazing. This Orthodox church, they do everything wrong. They don't use guitars nor drums. They go on kissing the icons even more than before, singing in Greek and everything wrong. But they are growing and they are attracting people. And I said, because they do everything right. To implement a seeker-sensitive church, according to, would be a wrong idea in this environment. So they really do everything right. So there's a problem when you mix some models with universal principles. You become blind. You believe your model, it is the typical example of this universal principle. And when I see the diversity of churches that went through an NCD process, I'm not proud, but I'm happy that this happens. And to some degree, the unity gets stronger. We see it in a conference like this. We feel very well connected, even if our churches may be hostile towards each other. But on the other side, the diversity grows as well. And this is what the Trinity is all about. It's about unity and diversity. This is the general philosophical questions behind it. And to see it in action, that unity and diversity is not just academic, philosophical category, but you see it really happening when you look into the computer and into the files. You know, it's both unity, it's not either or, and diversity grow at the same time.
Cool. Adam.
I think one of the broader picture observations would be that NCD emerged, you know, post-96 around that time, where there was a big increase in the number of the megachurch type conferences. So it kind of grew in parallel with that, and then you had to deal to some degree with the white noise of that. So you're trying to get a certain message across, but at the same time, Brother Wonderful is in town this week and no one's listening to anything you say until that disappears. And of course, I remember sending out a copy of the White Book to one of the pastors that I knew who was interested in church development. And it came back a week later with an angry letter about the short chapter about are large churches good churches? Again, just out of the data. So compare churches of under 200 people with churches of over 2,000 people. And person per person, the smaller churches were dramatically, was it, how many times over? I've forgotten the number. 1,600? Anyway, enormously more effective per person than the large churches. But this letter came back just angry, saying, you know, the church of today needs that message like a hole in the head, and it's terrible. It's like, we're just counting numbers. We're not making this up. And so that hostility there, but you know, it's been tragic in recent history. Some of the dramatic falls that have happened in my country and other countries from various famous pastors, and I feel like there's a shift in the mood whereby almost humility or a serious-mindedness about, well, how do we really grow the church? Let's not just latch on to something that seems to be a nice idea or someone charismatic enough is presenting it, but how does it really work? Which encourages me, because again, one of the most common reasons that churches come back to NCD if they've lapsed for a period of time is not because revival's broken out, but just because we're still saying the same thing. So it's our boringness which is our greatest...
The humble pot plant.
It's just a pot plant. A pot plant grows like, oh, maybe that's true. Let's try it again. And so I hope that's what we're seeing in the church, because the idea of church health, while it was radical and weird when Christian first started, you know, everybody talks about it now. It's not that remarkable. It's now a matter of, well, what exactly do you mean by that? Let's have that conversation so we can really make some progress.
And I think that ties very closely to this seeking for authenticity, especially by Gen Z, and the whole idea behind spiritual renewal. Something's happening in the church, something's happening in the world. We're here, and we're now 30 years more mature. The work that you do, you've both sort of mentioned this sometimes, can be lonely. You feel like nobody else is listening sometimes. How have you coped with that? Maybe individually, but also together sometimes. How has that played itself out?
No, you go.
Because you related this to maybe our relationship and working together, at least indirectly. I cannot identify fully with the sentence that you are lonely. No, that's not the right thing. The majority, the overwhelming majority of people misunderstands you at times, which is understandable. When we started with the energy paradigm, it's esoteric and Buddhism and whatever, all rubbish, complete rubbish. They have no understanding, they have not read anything. It is biblical, you know what I mean. But, and it frustrates you if then the Bible-believing people who criticize it, they are not Bible-believing, you know, they love their comfort zone. So when you say, so let's open the Bible. Are you open? There are 34 verses. We go through them. How many times do you have? And normally their eyes should get that glance. Is that let's study Scripture. Let's move into it. They close it even in front of myself. They don't want to hear it, you know, because it's their comfort zone that is, for many, not for all, very defining. Some say, okay, that's very out of the box. I've never thought it like this. I'm not convinced, but let us explore it together. That would be biblical. You know what I mean? That is Bible loving. The other thing would be not. These situations are sometimes difficulty if you are misunderstood and misunderstood all of the time. But then comes the thing that even relates it to the two of us. If nobody would understand you, it would be difficult. But then there is a smaller circle of people. It is a synonym then for Adam, or includes Adam as well. And you can share things. And even if one of us doesn't agree to the other, but you explore it together. And I've always found people like this. Thomas Bonhoeffer was one of the people who assisted me. So anyway, but when I put it deeper to the level of us cooperating in word, the deepest thing where we really went deep with Adam was in the phase when all the topics, the items, for the questioners has to be developed, which is intellectually very sophisticated, very, very so. You cannot just invent some items, what you think, but you have, apart from the statistical side, that you have to give it to different people in different cultures and test it mathematically and so on. But before you can do it, you have to develop a first version of a questionnaire. And then you have to go through it. How would Pentecostal in Brazil with a sacramental style answer this question when he fills in this questioner for the first time. How would he answer the same question after he had grown in that area? You have to step into the shoes of all of these people. And we had these sessions in these intense phases, sometimes 8 hours per day and 5 days
your day.
a week. It is extremely exhausting, and with somebody like Adam, you can do it, because I was almost killed by the intensity of this. And I learned one thing. After this exercise, 1 week of these things, you cannot be a fundamentalist. In the questionable word, when I speak about fundamentalism, I don't mean believing that the Bible is an authority for us and nothing like this, but fundamentalism in the sense of dogmatism, only my view is correct, and all of that. Because you went into the shoes, into the moccasins, you know, of your neighbor so intensely, and that it changed this mathematical exercise with this rationalist Adam changed my spirituality in the good sense as well. I have to add this anecdote because you speak about something when Jesus, you admire the rational side in him so much. When I heard Adam for the first time talk about this, I believed that was a joke. It was like a caricature. I mean, I was in a worship service of your church at that time. I think it was a Salvation Army-based group. And then there was a sharing time, and they were invited to share the most moving experiences and so on. And when people shared about it, I had tears in my eyes. It was so moving what they experienced. I felt my emotion. Then Adam stood up and said, for me, the most exciting thing, how Jesus processed all of these things. You almost saw your forehead, you know, and projected on Jesus. These things in his head, and responded to this and say, now give us the solution. What is your story? No, that was Adam's story. That was the moving, you know, thing from him. So he is, so to speak, one side, there's an enormous gift there, and then the openness, because of that, to learn from the other side and not to defend your box. This is, he's a model for me in that area.
Yeah, I think there's been plenty of phases that have been, you know, exciting, and other phases that have been, you know, incredibly difficult over time, again, because of people not understanding what's happening, or just regular feelings of being misunderstood in different zones. And I've said to my wife many times, you know, the defense mechanism is, well, we haven't been proven wrong yet. You know, revival hasn't broken out, the world hasn't completely been transformed, but at least we haven't been proven wrong yet. And you can hold on to that at certain points in time. And then, of course, you reconnect with Joy Boy here, and and I mean, you know, I knew that he had gift of faith high in his gift test, but it's just outrageous to watch it. It's yeah. With the challenges that are faced, and the problems that arise, and then, oh, maybe that half a book will need to be rewritten. This latest project, oh, they don't like those 3 entire chapters that took however many months to do. Okay, we'll just rewrite those. Like, oh, good gracious me, which is helpful, because it's like someone else believes, and you don't need many, but you know, to have those injections is like when I meet with you of a Wednesday, you know, like there's okay, we can keep going. And I can only think of how many, I mean, Jesus was constantly frustrated by people not having any idea what he was talking about, and just moments where he would meet someone who understood it, and it's just like, oh, that's okay, I can go on, I can go all the way to the cross because I found one person, you know, a Roman centurion who had faith enough that I could do something when my Jewish followers didn't believe in it. Yeah, so I think it's a real challenge. But it's funny when our first connection, first email ever was wonderful, because Ian Campbell, who we mentioned earlier, who was a partner in Australia, and he was my mentor at the time. I'd started developing some resources to do with the growth forces and things, and so Ian sent it to Christian and said, oh, this young guy Adam's doing some work here, and maybe you could have a look at that. And so then maybe you could send him an email to encourage him, and you can usually picture this very, you know, wow, it's awesome, that's great, off you go. But it was this very, yeah, you could tell.
Yeah, I remember it from my side that I got this message. I hadn't met Adam yet, and I was supposed to write a message of encouragement. And I said, yeah, okay, if you get involved in it, expect that your life will become more difficult than ever before. You have to pay a high price. Your family life will be affected by it, everything, but I can guarantee it's worthwhile. And that was seriously meant as a letter of encouragement. But it was a prophetic message, you know, all the elements of it.
Every piece is true. Okay. Our last question is, if you were advising your 30-year younger self, what would you tell that younger Christian or that younger Adam? What advice would you give to them? Maybe the same advice.
It is, to a certain degree, I have difficulty even to get involved with this question, because the part that I have a more developed self now than 30 years ago is by trial and error, not by somebody telling me what I have to do. You have to learn it yourself. So the more mature self wouldn't counsel me, don't make the experience, just believe me, it's right. He would reject it. He has to learn it personally. But nevertheless, I see the point behind your message. I would probably recommend to the young Christian the opposite of what most people in my surrounding would. Be careful, don't take that many risks, think about your own future and so on. I would probably encourage that young Christian, you are not courageous enough, you know, take risk. If there are conflicts, you can stand it and so on, rather than, you know, look for some ordinary job where you get your salary every month or something like this. But this is hypothetical, because I am right now, you could say, I may be my inner self that is 30 years older, but here I'm quite happy about the Christian who made a lot of mistakes, but only through these mistakes and learning by trial and error, he came to the maturity that now has grown. So I'm not unhappy about the so-called detours, because they were not detours. It had to be done like this. So probably this inner self would say, even if I look at pictures of even when I looked at South Africa, a picture from me, I was 22 years younger and slimmer. Well, I would not generally, sometimes I would say, okay, I've listened to the wrong people, I've lost a lot of time, I shouldn't have done it. But you didn't know this beforehand, so you had to go through it and you had to experiment. So I would not allow this more mature inner self to block or inhibit the risk-taking attitude of the young Christian.
I would tell my younger self, just delete all emails from Christian. Delete all emails from Christian. Your life will be simpler. I think, for me, part of the, again, in my own character development, if I could somehow have gone back and said that, to be more measured in how much I give to others through the process, and I think this applies to many pastors as well, is require responsibility from people in terms of how much you give towards them, because for me, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, of course everyone's going to fall in love with their minimum factor and they're going to work hard, so I'll throw myself at everything and try to help with everything, as opposed to we'll give you some homework, we'll see how you respond, and then to measure that out. And I think that would be a major part for me, which I'm endeavouring to correct now in various ways.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being authentic and real with us at the international level, the global level, and at the personal level. It's just a delight. Thank you very much.